My first day in federal prison, I found myself having breakfast with the attorney that was overseeing our entire case. He's a government activist who served time from not paying his taxes, believes it's unconstitutional. He defended high-profile cases with high-profile people, such as Huey Newton of the Black Panthers, George Christie, the Hells Angels, Raymond Shrimp Boy Chow, organized crime family, Hop Sing Boys, Barry Bonds trainer Greg Anderson in the Balco case, plus many more. Hollywood made a movie inspired by him called True Believer in 1989. He was portrayed by James Woods. I would consider him an American icon. I'm talking about Tony Serra.
All right, salute to you all. JC here, and look. I'm not by myself today. Somebody rolled in from Vegas yesterday. Great to have Mkali back here. I haven't seen him in person in, what, 5 years, something like that? It's been a minute, you know. 10. Wow. Even more. So anyways, we've been catching up. Folks, we've got great footage of places where me and my guys did our walk and talks. We have places here where the old restaurants that are still in the area that made it through all this stuff, where we used to go chill. There's actually 2 Italian restaurants. One we didn't even remember about, you know, on the one street south of where we were at. So, but anyhow, it's great to see that, you know, that it was very much similar in many ways, with some decent changes considering all that the state's been through in the last year or so with COVID and whatnot. So anyhow, on to today's festivities. Today,
I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Tony Serra. How you doing, Tony?
Hi there.
Last time I saw you, we were in green jumpsuits.
Yes, Lumpar Camp. It's a vacation country for me. I can practice law, you know, I can read, I can write, I can work out, I'm outside. Oh, give me Lumpar prison every time.
Yeah, that was that case. I was in a case, a marijuana case, and Tony was overseeing the whole case himself. It was through his law firm. I had a public defender. Tony pulled me aside and he said, "Don't worry about it, Michael. We got you. Just follow along my lead. I'll talk to your public defender, and we'll make this work." And then about 5 months down the road, Tony went on his vacation, and about 3 more months later, I was joining him on that vacation. My first day there for breakfast, I was in the chow hall having breakfast with Tony.
You went to Lumpar Camp then, right?
I was sitting right with you.
No, it's a camp that is over the sacred Indian ground. So there's relics, you know, to be found, and a lot of history with respect to Native Americans, you know, there. So you have that, and then there's beauty to it. There's, like, you know, trees, and there's all kinds of vegetation. They made me a gardener, you know, the last time. I've been there on 2 different, I've been convicted 3 times. So I'm a tax protester. So every time I go to LOMPOC, and so this was, when you were there, this was my 2nd time. I was doing 10 months. And my God, I published 3 books coming out of that period. And, you know, I did a lot of writs and a lot of kind of law for various inmates. It was a very productive time for me, very, how would you call it? Introspective. It's a time to think, a time to look inward, a time, to be creative in other areas that you don't have time on the outside to explore. So I view it as us meeting there as a good omen.
Yes, I was there. I read 50 books. I wrote a memoir. I got into the best shape of my life. I got Cordon Bleu certified. I took the time and I made it positive too, Tony. And I would meet with you.
You read 50 books, man. That's great. That's wonderful.
That's how I did my time. I try to do it the best I can for myself. Got in the best shape of my life. I just focused on me. So it was a really prosperous time for me. People ask me how I did that time, and I said, it's probably one of the best years of my life. And they're like, "Are you serious?" And I go, "Well, you don't have no bills, you have no worries, you have no problems. You actually just have time to focus on yourself, like if you were back in high school again."
You can work out and you can run, and it's a place. I don't know. That's not very punitive, other than you're there and you're not away from your work and family, etc. But there's great beauty there. You certainly made. It's like you read enough to have a degree. I mean, nowadays you do it through the internet, but you probably could have got a bachelor's or a master's if you read in a specific area. But
we had a gentleman there, remember, that got busted for a cocaine out of Florida that had been down for 30 years and worked his way into the camp. And he actually written like so many books and had his master's.
Yeah.
I don't remember the gentleman's name, but I remember when we got there, very mellow guy, and he was still writing another book as we were there.
I remember one person, two different ones who wrote books that were published and meaningful. What I enjoyed about LOMPOC camp, I think it was like every Friday or maybe once a month, the Native Americans would have a ceremony, and they would create kind of an igloo. I mean, you went inside, and there was smoke, and it was very religious, very people were singing. I was, because I represent Native Americans, not that I am one, I was invited, to participate in their sweat. I think it was a weekly sweat, and there was it was a religious experience. They bring in the hot stones, and then all the smoke comes up, and you inhale it, and you start perspiring, and they're chanting, and they're kind of quasi-religious oration. It was really something. I learned so much in Lumpar. If I'm lucky, I'll go one more time. I'm old now, but I still don't pay taxes. I still protest. If I'm lucky, they'll prosecute me one more time, and I'll get to go back to Lumpar before I die.
So Tony, I did the sweat lodge too before I left.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Oh, good.
They take you in with the sage. They brush it over you. You walk in counterclockwise. You sit down Indian style. They have the pit in the middle. They put the rocks in. They pour water over it. They close it up.
Yeah,
I damn near passed out. It's like being it's supposed to be the rebirth of being. It's supposed to be like being in your mother's womb. And the rebirth, and I couldn't do it for only one round. I died in that place. I had to apologize to every person in there because they had to take me out of it after the first round. But yeah, the chants were going. They were speaking in Cherokee tongue. It was a great experience.
No, it really was, and I still remember it vividly.
So as going back to your career, what made you become a lawyer?
Well, it was a fallback position. I was an epistemology major. It's a branch of philosophy at Stanford, And so when I graduated, I wanted to expatriate myself, and I wanted to, that old adage, bad poets make good lawyers. I wanted to go to another country and join, I don't know, kind of intellectual zone. So I went to Tangier after graduating from Stanford, and it was kind of a hotbed then of expatriates, mostly from France and England, and they were, creating lots of art and lots of literature. French existentialism was in vogue at that time. So I went there and remember I was a jock at Stanford. I boxed light heavy and I played baseball and football, etc. So I was pretty clean, pure, And I went there, everyone's, shooting up or
Right.
they're taking a lot of drugs. And
Right.
I didn't like the scene. It wasn't my scene because I was this kind of big innocent ex-jock, who majored in philosophy, which is a self-contradiction in itself.
Right.
So I said, screw this, I'm not going to obviously stay here. And I applied. I'd gotten pretty good grades at Stanford, so I actually applied to Bolt Hall and to be admitted without taking their tests, which are required. So I got admitted. Then when I went back to go to law school, I took the test and, obviously passed, and I did well in law school. So, why did I choose law? At that time, I was very naive, man. I chose law because one is I like semantic analysis, like words have always intrigued me, and law spends a lot of time on the definition, of various words and concepts, etc. So that drew me in. But I had in my mind I was going to go to New York and represent the mafia. That's really why I went, to law school. If you want to ask, if I wasn't going to be a poet, I'll be a goddamn, mafia defense lawyer.
Yeah.
And I have two brothers. We're all from San Francisco, but I have two brothers who migrated to New York. Might as well go there. But then what occurred while in law school, the Haight-Ashbury happened. See, it was in the 60s.
Right.
And I started going over there every night. I used to dance, at that at some of their clubs. Lots of drugs. Then I started dropping acid, et cetera, et cetera. And so I said, I'm not going back to New York. The action's here. Everyone in the world is coming to San Francisco, and many were, from all different walks of life. And so I entered really into that hippie so-called subculture, and kind of, went to the hate very frequently. I'm pro-drugs. I consider the victimless crime. I have defended every level, let's say, of alleged criminal activity as it relates to drugs. At night, as I said, I'd hang out at the Haight. I was a part of the scene during the 60s and still kind of carry, I don't know, that hippie banner, make love, not war, those kind of, slogans. I still believe in them. I took a vow of poverty back then, after an acid trip, and said I never want to make any profit on the practice of law. I so I became what they call the best pro bono lawyer, you can get. That pro bono means free.
Apparently, I also took a vow of poverty.
I'm a jury trial specialist. I'm known for going what we call back to back, one trial after the next. So I started going to meetings, and when there's people and they just go to meetings and they talk and they talk and they talk, and I said, shit, I want to do something. I don't want to go to one meeting, spend half of the time deciding when we're having the next meeting or something like that. So, I kind of retreated to practicing law, defending people arrested who were political, who were demonstrating, who were risking, themselves. I represented a lot of gay people, et cetera, et cetera. Every kind of crime other than, I don't do sexual whatever, molestation, rapes, and
Going back to Las Vegas, you represented a Sandy Murphy for the Ted Binion case.
I represented the male. You're talking about the female in the Binion case, and he's the one charged with murder. She allegedly was aiding and abetting, and it was a victory. He was acquitted on the murder, and it was a case of large publicity. I still think that they filmed the whole case, and I think segments are played here and there on occasion still. My cross-examination, for instance, of their pathologist is pretty well known in legal circles.
Did they find out who killed him?
He was a heroin addict, and the day before the night that the next day died, he ordered eight balloons of heroin, and from the perspective of our coroner in an autopsy report, he died of heroin overdose. It's easy as hell. But they had some phony theory that he you sit on a person, a heavy, and then you put your hand over their mouth so they can't breathe, and there's no marks on them, and they die. So that their pathologist said that, and he pointed to marks on the corpse where the buttons were, and he says that proves that I think the word is burked. Someone was sitting on him, and when you looked at it, it wasn't equidistant, so it couldn't have been buttons, and there was no impression. And I remember saying, if that's a button, I'm a button, or something like that. So their pathologist was highly, he was on television, he was out of New York, after our coroner said it was death by heroin overdose. His view was, oh no, he was burked and this was murder. And mostly that was the heart of their case. And he was just a big, from my perspective, a media star that wanted publicity.
Right.
But that was a meaningful case and got lots of media attention.
Have you ever represented anybody from the New York mob or anybody in the California?
Yes, of course. I don't want to go into names, but in Miami, there was an extension of the New York family, mafia family, that did loan sharking for the most part, not drugs. And there had been a severe beating. Someone they allegedly attempted to kill, hit him with a club so many times, but the guy lived and became a snitch. It's one of my, specialties is cross-examining snitches and showing why they're lying, et cetera, et cetera. So the case hung. So, and my guy, it opens up with his recorded statement because he didn't know the guy went to the police, and this terrible kind of confession. So it was a difficult case, but it hung, and then he went back to New York. That family wanted to engage me as their lawyer. I go, no, I'm a fucking hippie from, San Francisco. I'm not going to move into New York and, they're good to you. The mafia, the way they were offering me, like good money, a driver, and all of this kind of stuff. But I don't want any of that. Well, Rick Tabish is the defendant in Las Vegas.
That Binion
That's
Case.
different. The case here, we got a $2.5 million judgment against the FBI and the Oakland police for falsely arresting and, in a lot of ways, falsifying a case against these two Earth First people. They were the ones who were bombed, and they were saying, oh, they brought the bomb themselves, but we showed that was impossible. So it was a good result. But that's called a civil rights action. That was in Oakland, California. But it's one of the larger verdicts against FBI. They usually settle out of court when they're seriously, culpable, and you don't hear anything about it because they're in the agreement that settles out of court. There's what they call a covenant of silence. You can't. My God, the only thing that happened that I don't like, I represent him. We settled this case. Everything worked out fine. But the issue became whether or not Barry Bonds had received the steroids. And I sadly went away to Lompoc prison when they subpoenaed him to testify. And, he had another lawyer who advised him to take the fifth and refuse. Then they gave him immunity, considered a few. So he did a year rather than testify against Barry Bonds. They wanted, to indict Bonds and for lying to law enforcement about steroids. And it bullshit. And by him taking the contempt, very laudable, courageous. The connotation of it is that if he testified, he would testify against Bonds.
When I started taking college classes, I took like judicial reasoning and a few others. I took 3 or 4 law classes. And I discovered that the FBI got its start by going after Marcus Garvey. They were a political repression force. Way before they ever went after Italians or Irish guys or any real criminals. They were a political repression force. They went after the Black nationalist movement, Malcolm X later, and et cetera, et cetera. Do you believe the FBI still in the business of patrolling politics?
I just don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that's a bad answer because that's my answer too.
I would infer that a segment, small percent, is, and that the rest are not. But that's what they call an inference on an inference. So I would say defense lawyers are, one of the, ways of trying to ascertain police, FBI corruption and expose it. and by exposing it, hopefully reforming it. I think the other is their own people. Let's pretend the majority of law enforcement are in good faith. They're not brutal. They're
Sure.
not racist.
Yes.
They're not, homophobic. They're in good faith. And
Yeah,
they
exactly. And most
serve the public. Well, it's up to those good officers to investigate the bad officers.
right,
They
right.
should
And
do
you're right.
that. And that don't leave it up. By the time it gets to the defense lawyers, man, someone's been busted, it becomes
Right. And then it's on
there's a
them to
victim,
take on the government and that,
the
at that
defendant.
point, yeah.
So it's better that they, take seriously the internal investigations that, there's a few, not many, that reap, let's call it, take away the bad cops. First Amendment, it's got to be strong and cannot in any way be whittled down like so many other constitutional rights. I'm a First Amendment. I like transparency, that whole concept. So when I have cases and I'm not gagged, because nowadays they gag the lawyers so you can't comment on what's happening in a trial. And the press are interested, I'm always available, and I'll put on, sometimes let the defendant talk to the press. You've got to have First Amendment transparency to have I'm going to say free society, which used to be a motto, but not really realized. But at any rate, that
one more thing. I'm gonna let you go on with your day, Tony. I guess you were in High Times.
talk louder.
I guess you were in High Times magazine.
Do you mean in the past?
Yes, in the past.
I presume
Won the
so.
normal Lester Grimspoon Award.
Yes, I got that award. I got a whole bunch. Man, I've been, what would you call it, obsessive, lawyer now for almost 60 years, or maybe it's more. I'm probably the oldest. I'm in a jury trial right now, although it's recess this afternoon.
Amazed.
I'm 86. There's not too many people that old. A lot of lawyers that old, a lot of people that old, a lot of people older. Ferlinghetti just died at 101, the poet Lawrence Ferlinghetti. But there's not a lot of old people vigorously litigating in court. Because obviously just your physiology is impaired. Forget about your psychology and mentality. But luckily, I still can get around, and I still have a flame, in my speech. The old adage about it's a part of a Dylan Thomas poem. Do not go gentle into that last good night. Rage at the dying of the light. Well, I try to guide, my life in that fashion. I don't want to compromise. I want to be in court still, the voice of the oppressed, the angry semantic fist of the oppressed. So I still have, passion, and it's the greatest challenge in life is getting old. You really have to overcompensate in so many ways, which I'm happy and willing to do.
Well, Tony, there's maybe snow on the roof, but there's still fire in the furnace.
Yeah. Good one. That's a good one. I've never heard that before. Snow on the roof is gray hair. All right. Thank you for having me talk.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Tony. Have a good one. All right.
Much love and respect to you.
Thank you.
All right, you guys. That was Tony Serra. Appreciate everybody liking, sharing. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure that you guys ring the bell so you get the alerts when the new episodes come out right away. Thank you.
Thank you.